So this is just a rumor. This has not yet been confirmed by the Trump administration, but there's several sources have reported to Politico that one of the current commissioners of the FCC, Ajit Pai, will become chairman of the FCC. As you know, the FCC was told, don't make any more rules till the new administration comes in. It is up to the president to appoint the new commissioners. Half have to be Republican, half Democratic. We all already know that Tom Wheeler, who was an Obama appointee, is gone. And Ajit Pai is an interesting choice because he is already a commissioner. He does not need Senate approval. He can go right into the work. He was already confirmed. Now, that's just for the term. He would have to be reconfirmed when the new term comes up. Pai was a nominee by Obama. He is a Republican. In fact, he's a senior FCC Republican. But here's the thing that I find interesting. He is a rabid anti-net neutrality, a fierce critic of net neutrality, of many regulations that the Commission has passed over the last few years. Not just net neutrality, but a lot more. He will at least be acting chairman, I think, and we'll see if he becomes a more permanent chairman. But this has always been on the Trump plan to get rid of regulation, and in particular the net neutrality regulation.
This basically just about wraps it up for net neutrality at the moment, because if you read what this guy has been writing for the last 3 or 4 years and the talks he gives to various think tanks about the way, net neutrality is out. Any kind of laws against conglomeration of broadband ownership, they're out. Of course, if you're trying to set up your own municipal network, that's out as well, because he's not a big fan of those. It has to be done by a corporate thing.
Did you see, by the way, speaking of municipal networks, the proposed bill in, I think it's Wisconsin or Minneapolis?
Oh, for the, you can't have a municipal network if you can get a 10 megabit per second connection through any means possible. So if you have a satellite downlink dish, we can't have that kind of competition.
So there's already in many state legislatures and cities rules against cities setting up Wi-Fi, community broadband. I think it's a great idea, but I think the Republican point of view is that the public sector should not compete against private enterprise.
Well, hang on. What are they afraid of? One is either more efficient than the other. So
it goes back to the
competition.
It's the 86 Cable Act. So in the 86 Cable Act, in order to entice companies to come in and actually deploy, they basically said, we're going to give you the rights to set up connectivity across a municipality. However, there is a clause in there. It is part of the bill. It's not just an interpretation that says it needs to be for the betterment of the community. Unfortunately, it's so vaguely written that you can argue that locking you out of a faster connection is serving the betterment of the community. But, you know, looking at this whole thing, the net neutrality, the interesting part here is, yes, they could roll it back. They could get rid of the regulation. However, the hard part of setting up net neutrality the way that we had it under Wheeler was the reclassification. And it was the argument of whether or not that should be allowed. Even if they roll back the regulation, when the next administration comes across, if they are friendly to the net neutrality regulations, it's not going to be an 8-year fight. It's going to be a 2-month fight, because they're going to say the president is already there, that this is possible. We can reclassify. And once we have the votes, we do. So this, you know,
ultimately, it's Congress.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's Congress.
No matter what.
Then the hard part was already done.
Here's what Pai he wrote in September. He wrote a digital empowerment agenda. So I'm just curious. We'll go through these points, but there's 4 points. What do you think? First, I mean, some of this I'd say great. Gigabit opportunity zones to bring broadband and digital opportunity to their most economically challenged areas. Create these zones that would incentivize broadband deployment. Spur local governments to streamline regulations, help job creators, in other words, help business, revitalize the neighborhoods. Any area where the average household income is below 75% of the national median would qualify. State and local lawmakers would adopt streamlined broadband deployment-friendly policies. Probably that's a euphemism.
Yeah.
Significant tax incentives. Entrepreneurs incentivized to create jobs in these zones through a tax credit. Sounds like a good thing, right? Can't argue
we'll see what
against
the details are.
Yeah. Mobile broadband for rural America. I mean, this is one of the things we've called for a long time. It's clear that businesses, one of the problems, of course, in this country is that a business is less incentivized to provide internet to a very low-density population, a rural population. There's not enough money to be made.
Satellites.
So we've got to do something, in my opinion, like the rural electrification programs of the Depression. They did that to bring electricity to areas that would not be powered.
Yeah.
Let's bring broadband that way. He proposes increase the build-out obligations of wireless carriers and incentivize rural broadband investment by extending license terms up to 15 years. Move forward with a mobility fund phase 2 that includes tech-neutral performance metrics, eliminates duplicative support. I don't even know what we're talking about. Maintains support where it's needed, subsidizes the deployment of new networks, create a rural dividend. So basically incentives.
This is a copy of the plan they tried to implement in the early 2000s when they gave the telco industry $200 billion to build out rural internet.
And how did that work?
It never happened.
Exactly.
So if they want to do it again, I'm fine. But there has to be stronger language that says, you only get the money if you actually do it.
Well, no,
He wants to set aside 10% of the money from spectrum auctions to deploy mobile broadband.
You see, I'm all for incentives, but incentives have to be backed up by penalties. So if you take the money and you don't perform, you give it back.
Well, otherwise it's just a gift. It's here's a couple $100 billion.
The good news is SpaceX with their 4,000 satellites going up in low Earth orbit is going to have a system that's going to be a gigabit. And it's going to be cheap. You're going to have and there's OneWeb, I think it's the other one that's doing it, or trying to do it. Essentially, it's like a pizza box sized dish you put anywhere,
Right.
And then boom, you're all set up. And that's going to be here in 2 or 3 years, I think. And when that happens, I think we're going to see.
We definitely need some disruption.
It's going to be very disruptive because the whole concept of like. Upstate New York or some rural place, Montana, it's going to have gigabit over satellite. So there's going to be multiple providers doing this.
That's going to be the key.
Iridium just put up a bunch of satellites in the last SpaceX launch. So you're going to have multiple people putting up arrays of
I can't
internet
say
from this,
that this plan is a bad idea. The idea is get government out of the way, give some incentive to private industry to do this. It's what you would expect from a Republican administration as opposed to a government funding.
A former Verizon lawyer.
And a former Verizon lawyer.
But let's not demonize him yet, because remember, when Wheeler came in, we thought, oh, he is the towel boy for the cable industry. And it turned completely
These are not
opposite.
unreasonable if, as you say, the companies take this money and actually do this, take these incentives, the tax credits. He has things like government officials, I think this is great, should adopt a dig once policy so that whenever you do a highway or road construction project, you'll lay conduit for broadband. That makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of this makes sense. Maybe it's time to try another approach.
Well, possibly. I mean, what worries me more about this guy is that he is perfectly willing for telcos to mega merge, and that just reduces competition.
Well, and that's funny because
makes
Trump
the competition
said during
so much worse.
the campaign that
Trump
he was
said a lot
against
of things during the campaign.
the Time Warner merger with AT&T. It was AT&T, right? He said we're going to stop that. But this guy, clearly, his position would be no.
His position is he's never met a merger that he didn't like.
Yeah.
So, Trump did say that. Trump said a lot of things in the campaign. Now we've got to see whether he matches up to it. If he does, great.
Yeah.
He'll get my full support. But I've got my doubts, put it that way.